Coming up, Tom Trebojevic flies as the Eagles rock. Wigan and Lee bring in the biff of the borough, and a former South boss drops in to discuss his plans for the future of Rugby League. Yes, hello and welcome to the Sideline Chat podcast, the one-stop shop for Rugby League. Conor Marcellus with you today. Unfortunately, Mark Henry's unavailable, but I am happy to say I am joined by former South CEO and former General Manager, Mr. Shane Richardson. Good afternoon, Shane.
Hey, Conor.
How are you doing this afternoon?
Not too bad, mate. Bit chilly up here in Lura, but it's we're all in lockdown, so we just got to suffer through it.
Yeah, we all have to do our part.
Yep.
Even when we're out here, it just feels like lockdown goes on forever.
Yeah, it
Now,
does.
enough of that doom and gloom. Let's go on to a little bit more of a light-hearted topic. Now, I understand before your time in the in various administrations, you were actually involved with Super League. Is that correct?
Yeah, I was on the board of Super League in England for 3 years when I was in charge of Hull. So there was 5 of us on the board, and we ran the Super League at that time. So yeah, I was the only Australian on that board. So
when did you first get involved with Hull FC? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah, we originally started up Gateshead in 1999, and then we moved to Hull in 2000 and 2001. So we had 3 years in England running Hull / Gateshead.
And so what happened with that joint venture? Because I understand it collapsed. What was sort of the
No, it did collapse. What happened was that, unfortunately, the way the game is that in England, it's when you start up a new venture, which was what Gateshead was, they restricted the amount of television money they gave you. We gave you half compared to what everybody else got. It was a very difficult world to try and run and operate it up there. So after 12 months, we realised that it wasn't going to be a success. And to make sure we paid the players and all the people who were involved, we merged with Hull. And so all the debts were finalised and paid off, and nobody missed out on a dollar. We went to Hull and went on to make Challenge Cup finals and raise Hull from the second division to the top of the first division.
You left Hull FC in 2001 to take up a position down at the Penrith Panthers. What position at that stage 20 years ago was Super League trying to reach by the time you left? And have they achieved that 20 years on?
No, they haven't achieved anything 20 years on. In fact, I think they've gone a little bit backwards. The challenge has always been that, that there's never been a structure put in place, a quality form of development. There's too many so-called professional clubs and the money spread too thinly. And then on top of that, the quality of players coming through hasn't been of the standard. So the standards dropped off, and consequently, they've lost probably 25 to 30% of their television rights.
I see. And economic circumstances in the last couple of years wouldn't have helped that cause. Am I in the right ballpark on that?
It didn't help the cause, but the government's bailed them out, to be fair and honest. And I'm not sure whether they'd be if they hadn't had that. The reality is, though, they haven't got a quality competition that is able to be sold commercially, and they struggle with factions and infighting and all sorts of things within the group. It's a great competition. I believe in it immensely, but I think at the end of the day, they've got to come to the reality of what's going to be required to make them a business that people want to buy into.
Well, that's a perfect segue into the next question. When did you reach the conclusion that the game in England, Super League more generally, needed to restructure long term? And when did you first think about coming up with this plan here?
Well, I've known that they've had problems for years and years. I naturally assumed that they'd get themselves out of it. I know a lot of people in England. I know all the club owners and people there, obviously still friends with many of them. But really, I just got frustrated at the end of last year that unless we have a strong British Rugby League or English Rugby League and a strong Rugby League in France, I've got this great interest in international Rugby League. I think it's an untapped source. But as long as you've got a competition over there that is struggling to survive, a competition that not really able to financially support Europe and particularly France, you're going to struggle to get international football to the level where you want it to be. So my point was, well, what we need to do is to get investment in the game in England, and that investment should also then parlay into investment into the international game, which is also bankrupt. This World Cup not going ahead will, really they survive on that for the next 4 years, and they're going to find it very difficult to survive now. and going forward. So, I think that we need to have commercial investment. It's not unusual for the game in England. I mean, all the clubs are privately owned. There's no clubs really that are outside of Salford that are owned by the fans. So it's not an unusual world, but they need capital investment to grow the game to the level where immediately people would want to be interested in it, and more importantly, to grow the international game.
You mentioned that commercialism that needs to be there for the British game to flourish a bit more alongside its bigger rivals. You mentioned in this proposed structure here that you say that the next step would be to get rid of the toxic Super League name. Why is it that Super League as a brand carries a bad reputation? Is it contextually historic given the problems in the 90s with it in rugby league, or is it a reaction to the recent big time football problems where the 6 biggest clubs tried to form their own elite competition?
Well, it's not a Super League for a start. I mean, that's the reality of it all. Super League's got a bad taste in Australia. You know all the reasons for that. I don't have to history of that. So if you're going to try and promote the game internationally, the word Super League's not a good word to use. It's just as simple as that. And I think there's a lot better names that they could do that would be able to identify what they are and what their league is. The second thing about it is Super League is not a word that necessarily anybody understands. It was put there because Australia put it there when the Super League wars were on, and Murdoch virtually bought the rights to the English Rugby League through Maurice Lindsay. So there's a whole lot of connotations about Super League that we don't need, and I really believe if we're going to start a new business up and start revitalise the business that's there, it needs to start with a new name. Like all these things, though, the name's not as important as the steps and structures you're going to put in place to make it worthwhile.
Of course, and part of that is you suggest creating a new 10-team competition with 8 clubs from England and 2 from externally. So you've already suggested Wigan, Saints, Warrington, Leeds, one of the Hulls from England already a lock-in, and with the Catalan Dragons, that makes 6. Out of the 12 clubs right now, what happens to the other 6 clubs who potentially don't make the cut in this 10-team restructure?
They play in the second tier. In my plans, there's not enough players or viable clubs to have these 3 divisions they've got at the moment. Even they know that. It's not something So the reality is you need 2 tiers, and if you don't make the first tier, you're obviously in the second tier. I mean, that's how it works. And some of these clubs, they really struggle financially. They can't compete at the top level. And more important, the spread of quality players in Super League is so thin that the numbers don't equate to having the number of teams that are in it at the moment. So to me, it's a no-brainer. You could then concentrate on the second tier and building them up with academies and doing the right thing as far as development goes. And then there should be no third tier. It's an amateur sport. If you've ever been involved in rugby league, I obviously run a club in Hull, which is one of the great rugby league cities in England. And some of the amateur clubs in Hull are equal to nearly all of the third division teams in England. Because they don't pay their players, but they are strong. In fact, in my opinion, they would beat nearly all of the third division clubs in England, clubs like Skirlaw, etc. So as well. So I just think that that you're kidding yourself trying to create 3 teams. Narrow it down to 2, focus on those 2 divisions, and pour money back into the development of the game.
As for the expansion, getting back onto the top flight, where do you think would be the strongest grounds for development? Would it be in the south of England, or would it be trying to build another team in Wales?
I think, look, Wales would be an obvious choice to do, but London obviously is still important. I mean, they've had all sorts of things that have happened in London over the years, and we're very lucky David has hung in there. But look, the reality is though that Newcastle has become a really, believe it or not, even after Gateshead, Newcastle's now a huge growth area for rugby league. They're in the second division in the middle of it, or first division, championship, whatever you want to say, in the middle of it. They're a very strong proposition. York is obviously in Yorkshire, but York's got a great ground, a very smart operator who's running it going forward. They've got a whole range of different clubs. But it's not my decision to make that. My decision is to say that, in my opinion, financially, there are only 5 clubs that you could say would make the 8, 2 externally, so there's only 3 that needs to come. If you make 12, you've got to find 5, but I don't believe there's 5.
Fair enough. Now, if the RFL was to agree to adopt this structure, what timeline should they be working with? How long should this plan be for this restructure? How long do you think it should take to achieve the most effective results possible?
Well, in my opinion, if you do it before the start of next season, you should do it. Even though it might be a rush, it might be a problem, but the latest the year after. But, it's, as I said, my plan's not just about restructuring the English Rugby League. It's about restructuring the international game as well. So the sooner they are able to restructure their game and make it a saleable item, we would be able to do something externally with International Rugby League, which is dying on the vine and shouldn't be, because it's a magnificent property.
Well, you perfectly segued that into the international game. You call for a 4-year map for both the Northern and the Southern Hemisphere to have a almost synchronized calendar. I just got to ask, how would that look in a 4-year cycle? How would you properly structure that every 4 years?
I've actually outlined that in the paper, but it's very simple in the sense of what matter is that, first of all, Australia and New Zealand and the Southern Hemisphere are never going to play tests in the middle of the year. You've got to start from that premise, because it's not going to happen. Clubs are not going to let it happen. You can say it's all biased. The reality is we're about trying to, in the Southern Hemisphere, about player welfare and trying to restrict the amount of games, not increase them. The window now has been created post-season and created successfully, which not a lot of people thought it would. And so test matches should be done at the end of the season. Now, a 4-year cycle would simply mean this from a Northern and Southern Hemisphere point of view. You would play, in my opinion, a World Cup in that cycle of 4 years. You would have one tour of Australia to the Northern Hemisphere in that cycle of 4 years, one tour of England to Australia and New Zealand in that cycle of 4 years, and a fallow year. So if the players aren't completely eaten up in a 4-year cycle, and that fallow year will be leading to a World Cup, so you can structure it and do it properly. On top of that, you'll obviously have test matches as well, which are already on the go between Tonga, Samoa and Fiji. I see no problem with one-off tests being played. If we still had a stand-alone origin game, I think that would be more than fair and reasonable for Tonga, Fiji and Papua New Guinea to play on that weekend on a Friday and Saturday night. I think it's made for media and it's made for the development of the game in those areas. But it's not made for bringing England and France and everybody else in the middle of the year to play test matches. It's ridiculous for their competition there, and it's ridiculous for ours. So we've got to work on the basis that that's the window of opportunity at the end of the year and work from that. The second thing is, there is no doubt in my mind, one of the great properties of the International Rugby League. So if you did that, you would be able to create a crowd situation and a television situation which is easily to be sold to promote international football. Because the reality is that the IRL, the only money they make, they lose money on test matches. Some of the rubbish test matches they've organised, like the test in Denver, lost them a fortune. They've got to start working on the basis, how do we make money? Because the only money the ARL makes is from test matches. That's why they tried to play so many rubbish test matches over the last few years, because they need the money. And that's why the World Cup collapsing is a major drama for them, because they will have no income for the next 4 years if that happens. So what we've got to do is set up a structure in place that the IRL are able to get money from these test matches in this window of the next 4 years, have a budget and cash flow plan based around it, and ensure we stick to the task to be able to get media and sponsors involved when they know a set format's there for them to invest in. There is no set format there at the moment for investment. The final piece of the puzzle is that a magnificent opportunity for the IRL, which owns the rights to World Nines, to run a World Nines competition along the lines that Sevens are running rugby union. It doesn't have to use up at all the players that play currently, as does the rugby union Sevens, where very few of them go on to play test matches for the country, and a lot of them come back from test matches to play in Sevens. There's a type of player that is suitable for Nines, which is not necessarily suitable for 13s. And we should be encouraging that, because teams like Papua New Guinea and Samoa and Tonga and France, etc., would be more than competitive in that type of Nines competition, whereas they are struggling, in particularly France and USA, etc., they are struggling to be competitive in 13 men aside.
Just on the France point that you made, how would you view their appointment of Trent Robinson as sort of like a general manager for French Rugby League? What sort of impact do you think he would have on that organization?
Well, first of all, I think he'd have enormous impact. He's a very intelligent man, speaks French, and is smart. So that's a good start. A great rugby league guy. But what he's got to do that job, he needs tools to do it. And the tools to do that is a structure that's put in place that allows him to be able to expand the game as he knows it should be, and he's smart that way. And secondly, the tools that put in place an opportunity to be able to get media deals done. And the best way of doing that is if they have two sides, Toulouse and Catalans, we can encourage that opportunity. And that when we tour to England to play a 3-test match series, we also play a one-off test in France to promote the game.
As well as that, would that also include sort of trying to help the French elite league side as well? I mean,
you improve the elite league side the same as you'll improve the British side when you have more of elite French players coming through. And by having two teams involved, you'll be encouraging more French players. In fact, people are going on how well Catalans are going at the moment. Pretty exciting. Bernard's done a great job over there. But really the stars of their game at the moment are these young French players that they're producing. You've come from nowhere. And I think that if the profile raises, you'll get more and more young players who'll come through Toulouse and Catalans to become French rugby league players. And the more they're exposed on the international stage in an organisation that's run by a guy like Trent, the better they're going to become. Because at the moment, it's ad hoc. You play French B, it's all over the place. You know, we spend all this money chasing down Czech Republic and you name it, we spend the money on it. When you've got a rugby league world and the French that have survived and driven it through the hardest times of rugby union bashing them, and still there in existence with a team that's on top of the British Rugby League, that's where we see, in the old worlds of David Gallop, fish for the fish are.
Oh, very interesting words there. Now, you've on this 5th point of your international plan, you call for Origin to be played in the season and for Australia and New Zealand not to play a test match, but the Northern Hemisphere clubs, provided that they don't require players from the South, that they're allowed to go ahead. What's sort of the reasoning behind that? How does that?
Well, let's go back a step. Once again, one of the major things that we're not aligned with the Northern Hemisphere is this, is we have a massive feeling about player welfare. We have a very strong players' union who constantly talk about if the players' union and the people could do it, you would be cutting back fixtures from 24 to 22. The less fixtures, the more likely, the less wear on the players. What you don't, and then you've got the state of origin thrown in the middle of it. What you don't need is creating more fixtures, more games during the season for the wear and tear on these players. You know, you're seeing the struggle of these players now when they come out of origin. You know, with the Penrith situation at the moment, it's a very big call on the exertion of these players and their welfare and well-being. And I don't see by adding a test match in the middle of the season, it does anything to value add to that. Now, why I say Tonga and Samoa? Well, those players are playing it in the NRL anyway, and Origin players are playing it the same weekend. So I've got no problem with that. But as far as taking players to England to play a one-off test match, it's ludicrous. It's not in the best interest of player well-being. And besides that, the NRL would not ever consider it.
Well, of course.
You know, you want to get into these esoteric arguments about international rugby. What you've got to get into is this. What is going to work? What is going to get them together to make a decision that's going to work? And making decisions that aren't based on player well-being, you're never going to get that sign-off from the NRL.
Well, it's interesting about that sign-off because in recent days, all 16 clubs have agreed to back both the ARL and New Zealand Rugby League's decision to withdraw from this year's World Cup, which of course is now postponed until next year. Is
that the case, or is it the NRL clubs don't want it and the ARL see New Zealand Rugby League back them?
As a former CEO, how would you have negotiated or responded to this decision if you were in, say, your successor Blake Solly's position right now?
Yeah, well, Blake and I are great friends, and Blake's got a great love of the international game. He runs Super League. I mean, he was a CEO there, so he gets it. Our problem is a very simple one, though, and the English Rugby League don't want to listen to it. We don't have 60 or 70% of our population vaccinated. we've got 16% of our population vaccinated. So the COVID passport doesn't exist in Australia and won't exist probably for the next 6 months. So we've got bubbles and all sorts of things trying to create a COVID bubble to allow this competition to finish, because without it, we'll be broke. And Valeni's is doing a magnificent job with Abdo to get this finished. So they're in COVID lockdown, they're in bubbles. So what we're going to ask them to do, you come out of the bubble, you go into a bubble again, then we'll take you across, despite the fact that you're not vaccinated, despite the fact that we have only got 16% of our population, we're going to take you across and put you in an environment in England where there's crowds and everybody around. And then we're going to bring you back in February, and by February, you're going to be locked away from your family. It is a purely health and player wellbeing decision. It gets back to my point before about player wellbeing. They have a different view in Europe than we have in Australia. And it's, to me, it's, am I disappointed? Yes, I am. But I understand the decision, and it's not about, I don't really believe it's about the NRL clubs being selfish. It's about them placing player wellbeing and the well-being of our competition first.
And so I would take it to this point that would you say it's not constructive for individuals at the top of the RFL chain, like the chairman, Simon Johnson, to describe the pullout as selfish, parochial and cowardly? Does that just make the situation worse? What does that?
Well, it does. And that's how my whole point is. As long as you're going to use those emotive terms, and you see, they always get back to one thing, and that is this: the NRL clubs, they are ruling things. They dominate. They won't let their players play internationally. And I've got some great friends in the game who believe that too, Steve Mascord and otherwise. But the reality is, from running a club, I know that the NRL clubs are supportive of international football. But what they've never had put before them is a pathway into international football that they can discuss, work together, a three-phase way of doing it to go forward. Now, this is thrust upon them, this decision on the World Cup, and they've made it unitedly, mainly about player wellbeing and welfare, and from here onwards. So what I'm trying to say is, using those emotive words, I understand it, and I understand it because it's from the pocket, because at the end of the day, financially, it's going to be a very difficult world for them. But the real world's got to be, what are we going to do to try and solve the problem of the bankruptcy of the game in Europe? This is not going to solve the problem. It's just it's a band-aid to the bigger problem, which is a restructure.
Okay, yeah, I can definitely see it from that point of view there. Now, I've got a couple of questions from my colleague who is unable to be here for this interview, so I'm going to put them to you now. As an ardent South supporter, do you see the Bunnies making history by winning the premiership after conceding 50 twice in 1 year?
Yes. And the reason for that is that, when Wayne took over the club, when I bought Wayne in 3 years ago into the club, we spoke about, and we started off like a bang, like we did the previous season under Seabold. I think we're on, top of the ladder and halfway mark, etc. And Wayne, we sat down and talked about it, that, it's very difficult to maintain your performance over a whole season. It's also very different. You've got to plan around state of origin. And we had a lot of players that played origin that year, had never been in origin before. And by the end of the year, we petered out. Last year, we came into the finals again in the same position. We didn't really peter out last year. What happened was we got a lot of injuries to key players at the wrong time. And if you have a look at Penrith's run, they got nobody injured. And to be fair to Melbourne, neither did they. So there's two things that, from experience, that you need to win a premiership. First of all is momentum, and the second thing is no injuries. Now, this season so far sees us in equal second position. It doesn't matter whether you're second or third, really, in the COVID world. And over the next 3 weeks, we've done that by losing only 3 games, admittedly to the top sides at 2 by 50. I was at Dubbo, so I know, going to Dubbo for a 50-point thrashing is not one of the great things in your life. But I know this, that we've beaten everybody else. There's a form of consistency there. Our challenge is our defence, and we've become better at it. We still have our lapses, but the reality is, and Wayne doesn't whinge, but over the last week, we had 7 of our starting 17, not 7 of our squad, 7 of our starting. There's no other team in the competition that had 7 of their starting 17. Now, there's some great players in that set. And over the next 2 weeks, all 7 of them will be back. So momentum, yes, we've got it. We're in second spot. No injuries. Touch wood for this weekend, but going into the next couple of weeks, everybody should be right. And if we have all that in place, we'll be very hard to beat when it matters.
Well, getting back on to Coach Bennett, this is his last year at the Rabbitohs, and Jason Demetriou takes over for 2022. How do you think he will go succeeding Wayne Bennett at the Bunnies?
I think he'll go great. I mean, the bottom line is we didn't just appoint Jason Demetriou because he was under Wayne in Brisbane. We did a really big search to say the deal we're going to do with Wayne is a 3-year deal, and we're going to have somebody coming underneath him to take his place. Wayne left that open because he wanted it to be an open decision from us. Obviously, he would have had a say at the end if he didn't like the person. But we did a really big coach search, and it got down to 2 people. And the best one was, in our opinion, Jason Demetriou, who's won, you've got to have coached men. He's won premierships with Cairns and Australian premierships with Cairns and Intrust. He's won a premiership with St George or Illawarra and an open premiership. He's coached men. He has an outstanding coaching record. I know him personally. He's a great human being, good family. He was the guy we chose to come in behind Wayne, and Wayne was always more than happy to have him there. So he's had 6 years under the best coach in Australia. He takes over a team that he's had a major say in recruitment over the last 12 months, a team that he honestly say his own. That old stigma, which is rubbish anyway, of Wayne leaving the club and the mess can't happen. It hasn't happened in the past, in my opinion, but certainly it's not going to happen at South. So we've got a very smooth change of coaches. Now then it's up to Jason Demetriou. He's got you can't coach well if you haven't got a great squad. Wayne Bennett didn't come to South because he loves South as a brand, but if we didn't have the players, he wouldn't have come. And it's the same with Jason Demetriou. He's inheriting an outstanding group of players with some outstanding leaders in it who aren't anywhere near their end yet.
Just on the curiosity of Demetriou's appointment, who was his main opposition? Because you mentioned that it was narrowed down to 2. Who was the other coach?
I really don't want to go on that because it's not fair to them. I didn't mention it at the time, and I wouldn't mention it now. But there are outstanding young coaches that we would have appointed. So they'd never coached their own team in the NRL. But, we did a really thorough search, as we always did on coaches. That's how we come up with Andrew Seibold. That's how we come up with Michael Maguire. So at the end of the day, we've done a pretty good job choosing those, and we've done a really good job choosing Jason Demetriou.
Oh, that's fair enough. Now, how did you find yourself at South Sydney and the path that you took to become a club CEO? Of course, you said you started out Gateshead Hull FC. How did it start?
I didn't start at Gateshead Hull FC.
Oh, that's right. Super League ball. My bad.
But no, I started out at Cronulla. I was the CEO of Cronulla for 5 years. So I started at Cronulla in 1994. I came from my club in Brisbane Easts with John Lang as the coach, and I took over as CEO. He took over as the. And one of the reasons for that was they got 2 Queenslanders because we were cheap, and we wanted the opportunity. So we got our chance at Cronulla. We were on the bottom of the ladder in receivership when we went there, and we managed to get them through to a top. I think the 5 years I was there, we were 4 of the top 5, and 4 of the 5 years were in the finals, and one away from the grand final twice. So, and financially we got ourselves back on the feet as well. So and then I went from there to Hull, 3 years in Hull, and then I had 3 years at Penrith. Took them from the wooden spoon to premiership, and then we went from there to South. And why did I go to South? Because there's no greater challenge in rugby league for a rugby league man was to try and make South great again. And I just couldn't refuse that opportunity. People said I was crazy. I'd come from a club that just won the premiership, was running 3rd in the ladder. When I took over South, we were on the bottom of the ladder. Actually, they would have won the wooden spoon, except Canterbury got thrown out of the comp. And so, therefore, the bottom line was that it was too good an opportunity. And then I, obviously worked with Nick Pappas and a great board and people to try and bring the club back. And I think we resurrected the club to where now it's probably viewed as one of the top 3 clubs in the comp.
Yeah. Okay. Redfern Oval, Mark's got written down here. He says Redfern Oval is the traditional ground of the Rabbitohs. Is there any way or chance in the future that the Rabbitohs could play regular first grade games there again, or is it just not up to standard as an NRL venue?
Well, first of all, there's a capacity at Redfern Oval for 9,000 people. We've got 30,000 members. So do you want to tell the guys from those membership who can't go along to that game? That's the first thing. Secondly, it's in an urban dwelling area. And one of the reasons the council, and particularly Clover Moore, who has no love of rugby league, but certainly has a love of Redfern, built that oval for us and built it as probably one of the premier training facilities, was because you realise that what the Rabbitohs meant to the Indigenous community in Redfern. But one of the things we agreed with her on, that we would never play NRL games there because of traffic calming and because of the fact of the exact location of where it is. We're able to play trials there. We're able to play SG ball, flag, second grade, which we do. We use the oval more now than we ever used it before. It's a magnificent oval, great for your spectators. But the deal we did with the council was we wouldn't play there. Thirdly, it's not right for television, and it's not right with lights, and otherwise to upgrade it. It's not worth our while to upgrade a ground like that for 9,000 people. When we have visions, people seem to forget. I know, we've been so successful when we've gone to, and people will whinge about ANZ Stadium and all the rest of it. But the reality is, I keep reminding people, South, in my tenure at South, holds the record. Here's a fact. The record for the largest club ever for a semi-final in the history of the game. I think it was around 59,000 versus Canterbury, and the largest club ever for a fixture versus the Roosters in 2012. It's nearly 60,000 people. You could never have done that by playing it. People don't realise that, but we hold those records in this era when crowds are so difficult to get. They were the records we broke when we were playing at ANZ Stadium. And that happened because we had bigger visions of what South was going to be than having 5,000 people going to Redfern Oval.
Oh, I didn't know that.
By the way, I love Redfern Oval. That's not a Richoism. That's a fact. Look at that. The largest club record is us versus Canterbury. I think it was 2012 or 13, and the largest semi-final. Sorry, the semi-final record was versus Canterbury. The largest club record was for the last game of the season in 12, which decided the minor premiership. The Roosters beat us, unfortunately.
So with the future, with the Stadium Australia redevelopment supposedly going on around about 2023, are the Rabbitohs committed to stay there, or do they potentially view maybe Bankwest Stadium as another viable alternative?
Or the Sydney Stadium?
Oh, of course, the new Moore Park development.
Yeah, yes. We've got our options. We've got an agreement with ANZ Stadium, but it's now Venues Australia. So really, the agreement is with Venues New South Wales, I should say, not Australia. So all those three grounds are all part of Venues New South Wales. So I'm sure what I think is a magnificent leadership group at South with Blake Solly and Shannon Donato, I'm sure that they'll make a decision that's best for the club over the next few months.
Okay, and final question. If the Rabbitohs don't make the grand final, who do you see playing on the day, and where do you think the grand final will be played, given the conjecture going on?
Grand final will be played in Brisbane, and if we didn't make it, it'll be Brisbane and Penrith. No, not Brisbane, Melbourne and Penrith. I should say Brisbane.
I was about to say.
They're all from Queensland.
Maybe 15 years ago, the Broncos could have done it.
Pardon?
Maybe 15 years ago, it could have been the Broncos, but...
Yeah, no. Melbourne and Penrith.
Melbourne and Penrith.
Only danger Manly.
So you've got Manly as the Smoky. Oh, right.
Well, I think we'll be in the grand final, but the only four teams that can win it are the four I've just said. Yeah. Can win it. I'm not saying not make it. Can actually win it. And it gets down to momentum, which Manly have got, and they've got over their injury run. But, of course, they're going to find it very hard to do it if Tom Trbojevic doesn't play.
And that will be a big deciding factor, no doubt.
Yeah, he's a great player.
Well, I think we've got everything covered out of this. Shane Richardson, thank you very much for stopping by the Sideline Chat, and hopefully we might see you again.
No problems at all, mate. Pleasure. Bye-bye.
Now, we resume with your Betfred Super League round 16, 17 and 18 debrief. And I got to tell you, there's a lot to get through. But we will start off with the first match of round 16. There are at least 3 postponements in this game, including Huddersfield versus St Helens, Lee versus Castleford, if I got that the right way around, and Salford hosting Hull Kingston Rovers. But the games that we did get in hand We'll start off with the Wigan Warriors going down to the Warrington Wolves, 21 points to 8. Now, Warrington, I underestimated again. I did it the first time around a couple of weeks back when I said Wigan could hold Warrington out. But the Wolves, they have just gone through in utterly convincing fashion. Once again, the right edge, still a little bit of a problem, but I think you can't really blame Harry Smith for that beautiful chip kick, as Marcus mentioned, just going up over the top, a room service catch for Liam Marshall for the second try. Either Wigan, there's no way you can defend and against beautiful room service like that. That just isn't. Where I think Wigan fell down is that they didn't stick with Warrington. And if you think of Warrington, that 1-2 combo that has been mentioned before, with Darryl Clark and Danny Walker off the bench. Now, I'm pretty sure Walker didn't play in this game, but it was always going to be a danger with Darryl Clark scheming around the middle of the ruck. It's just a plain fact is what it is. And from there, Wigan were punished after that, despite going in, well, really, a competitive halftime score all between the two sides. Wigan just didn't come out in the second half. And Warrington did a brilliant job of holding Wigan out. Once again, their defence playing a very strong part in that. And of course, Darryl Clark got the try assist. But I think the real standout for Warrington on this day, it was Blake Austin. One try assist, 4 tackle breaks, 1 offload, and just that cherry on top with the drop goal at the very end. There were questions over Warrington coming into this game after the poor performances against Leeds and against Huddersfield, but I think they're still on top with this. It's going to be a matter of sticking it to St Helens consistently, as in trying to beat them twice in the same year, and as well as the Catalan Dragons. That will also be a very big challenge for this Warrington Wolves side. As for Wigan, I don't think they're going to slide again. I think they're over that little period where they lost 5 games in a row, but they really need to work on the defence, especially around the middle of the run. And they able Josh Pulis and Blake Austin both to punch through the middle. And I just think the errors again, and they should have learned from this last time with Jake Mamo. They were down on the left edge, probably 10 metres out from Warrington's line. Next thing you know, I think it's Oliver Gildart again, tries to get the ball away. Jake Marlowe picks up, runs off with it. There's a Wigan player down in that play. I don't think from memory, it might have been Liam Marshall, but I can't remember right off the top of my head. And I know there would have been all the cries of, oh, they should have stopped the game. They should have called it back. Well, if he's not directly affected, why should they stop it? I mean, that's a little bit hard, sure. But that's just the reality of it all. But beautiful long-range effort from Jake Marlowe. Once again, that's 4 long-range tries he scored against Wigan just this year alone. So they really have to look into that. Warrington overall very much better, very much the better side over Adrian Lamsa. But I think Wigan can take a lot of comfort out of this, that they did match it up against Warrington and they almost came up with something. But again, the poor second half of showing and the shutout, it just cost them at the end. It really did. Meanwhile, the Catalan Dragons, they continue their good streak at the top of the table, down in Wakefield Trinity, 40 points to 20. Now, you would think against Wakefield, and I think I can safely say Wakefield have not been a contender all year. They just haven't. They have been absolutely outgunned by most oppositions they have played against. They have gotten lucky, I would say, on a couple of occasions with wins and almost upsets if we're talking about games against St Helens. But apart from that, they just haven't been there. And I don't know what to say. A double from David Fafita, so already that raises alarm bells about Wakefield's middle defence, as well as the loose forward Yusuf Adin, or Adin, however you pronounce this, but it's our surname, I should say. But I don't know what Wakefield have got other than trying to score through the middle. You look at the Catalan Dragons, and I know you could probably accuse them of doing the same. You got Sam Cassiano going for the middle. You got Gil Dudson, Da Costa jumping out from dummy half. But then you also got your strike weapons out on the edge, Now, of course, Wakefield have been missing Tom Johnston for large portions of the year. Yeah, so it really comes down to how Wakefield are struggling for depth and players at this point in time. You look at the Dragons, on the other hand. Tom Davies one side, Fuad Yaha, Sam Tompkins at the back, and the fact that they had James Maloney come back for the first time in about a couple of weeks, or he's already been back. But having James Maloney's influence on that game, Catalan were never going to be in trouble with this, despite the competitive halftime score. And it just showed in the second half, the left edge between Tompkins and Yaha, and then, of course, was the cost of making the most of his opportunities whilst Michael McAlorum still remains out of the side. So it's back to the drawing board for Wakefield again after getting their right side utterly disposed. I know they haven't had their preferred choice of squad run out week in, week out, and not everyone does. But they really need to step things up because the way I see things, Wakefield have just lost their 4th consecutive game in a row. That's their 12th loss for the year. If the Leeds Centurions get lucky in this back 3 months and try and jag 5 wins, they're in a relegation zone. They're gone. Out of it. So that's sort of my ideas on it. As for Marks, he did think that Castellan would put on an even bigger scoreline than that, but it just shows that, well, in his mind, Wakefield are improving, but they just can't compete with the top sides for the full 80 minutes. Well, I would probably point you in the direction of Wakefield St Helens a couple of weeks back for that one right there. Now, Hull FC against Leeds. Leeds, of course, running out with that, 22 points to 12. A very competitive first half. I felt like that game at the break, it really could have gone either way on this front. One try in it, of course, Reece Martin missed his opportunity to level the scores up at 6 apiece, but you can't take that from him. And he's only human after all. But Leeds were able to find ways around Hull FC. The second half, this is the Jekyll and Hyde problem that the Black and Whites have been dealing with, and now that they're starting to slow down a little bit, even with Josh Reynolds back in the side for Brett Hodgson, it just didn't work out. I mean, you got good strike weapons like Adam Swift and like Carlos Tumavave, but their defense is lacking, and the second half have just turned on their head at big time. Allowing Brad Dwyer any room from dummy half is probably cardinal sin when you're playing against the Leeds Rhinos, because how many times have you seen Brad Dwyer take a scamper from dummy half or try and jump out of dummy half and he somehow finds his way to the try line? It honestly happens one time too many. As for Harry Newman, well, he's having a good resurgence after the double leg break he suffered earlier in the year. Aaron really proving a handful out on that left edge for Richard Agarsa. In Mark's view, they did come out as surprise winners, the Leeds Rhinos, but at the end of the day, Hull haven't played in a while. This is his words, not mine. Whilst Leeds have had the momentum behind them with the win, and it just, I don't want to say Hull's oozing like Warrington in 2019. I don't want to say that whatsoever. But Hull have to understand that they are in a precarious position at the moment. Hull Kingston Rovers are just inside the top 6. Then you've got the Leeds Rhinos, and now Huddersfield are beginning to make a run against them. They know if their win percentage isn't as good, they're in trouble. So they've got to get back to what they were doing well at the start of the year, strong defence work in around the middle of the field, and then the attack flows on from there. Defence first, attack second. That's what I think Brett Hodgson should be working with at the moment. Now, who do I think was a standout for Leeds on this day? Well, I think it went to Reece Martin. 84 running metres, 3 offloads, and 5 goals from 6 attempts. So, Leeds aren't going anywhere, and now that they're starting to get back to full strength, well, pretty much close to full strength as they can get with no Jack Walker, there's going to be a real run to Old Trafford coming up in the next couple of months. So it's going to be very interesting to see where this Leeds Rhino side goes from here, and if Hollisey can hang on. Well, from round 16, we go to round 17, where there was only one cancelled fixture, believe it or not. One cancelled fixture. How about that? We have Wakefield up against Salford. That was postponed due to the, well, let's just call it the circumstances that we're not allowed to properly talk about, lest the big tech overlords come for us. So, we'll start off with the Wigan Warriors against the Leeds Centurions in the Battle of the Borough. Second time, or maybe the third time they've met this year. And, what can I say for John Duffy and Derek Beaumont? But I'm sorry, this was just another absolute annihilation. It genuinely it was. I mean, on one side, you've got Wigan coming off a disappointing defeat at the hands of Warrington. It was definitely a winnable game, and that they could have got on through with. And at the end of it all, it just turned into an absolute bloodbath. The only bright side, I would say, Liam Hood's try from dummy half, just locking the scores up at 6 apiece, but that's pretty much where it was left off. The left edge for the Wigan Warriors, Yamila Hanley bagging his first hat-trick. I think that was a standout performance from the son of Ellery Hanley, Rugby League legend. 3 tries, 150 running meters, 3 tackle breaks, 1 offload. That was an outstanding day at the office for Yamila Hanley. And then you back it up with having Liam Farrell come in with his 2 tries as well. John Bateman playing his part in the side. And it was just an absolute devastation for the Leeds Centurions. I don't think honestly, there was just nothing in it for them. And then, of course, there was the big blow-up between Jack Ashworth and Brad Singleton, both throwing punches like it's somehow 1970. And they both got red carded, so that didn't help Lee's cause either. That probably even contributed to the increase in tries scored against the Centurions, and it only makes their for and against much, much worse. Not that it was ever calculated by that anyway. But that's a good confidence booster for Wigan. Bullying a smaller side, well, it was. It was really bullying just that worst side that's struggling to try and keep up with the top sides, but it just hasn't been clicking whatsoever. But Wigan still maintaining their place in the top 6, but with the gulf between Hull FC and the Warrington Wolves pretty sizable on both sides, and with Leeds still hunting that top. Well, actually, Leeds are in the top 6, if I'll correct myself, and Hull Kingston Rovers have dropped out, so Leeds in the top 6, climbing high, despite having only 2 wins in their last 3 league games. They will close the gap. And speaking of Leeds, this one was an absolute cracker. I think for round 17, this was the game of the round. Leeds Rhinos and the Warrington Wolves. Warrington coming back from an 18-12 deficit to run out 27-26 winners in George Williams' first game for the Warrington Wolves. And I got to say this right off the bat. How much drop ball featured in that game? Because honestly, it was Leeds score, Warrington kickoff, Leeds make the mistake, Tedabano, oh dear God, what was that? What was that? Generally speaking, I mean, I know they were facing the sun from the east to the west terrace end, but you've got to take those balls, not let them go dead. Now, to be in all fairness, Warrington were doing the same thing. That was just drop ball and trading of tries. It was very hard just for someone to gain momentum over them. And then, if you're a Leeds fan, I feel sorry for you. But here is one of probably the greatest refereeing blunders of the year. Josh Charnley goes over in the corner. It's a very pivotal moment in the game. Sent up as a try by the referee. All the angles show he didn't ground the ball. And somehow, Brad Dwyer, and we keep talking about Brad Dwyer. Oh yeah, how about this? He's getting a bit of a run, just like all them runs out of dummy half. But instead of the obvious point being made that he has not grounded the ball, and in fact he got stripped in the in goal, which under the rules is fair game for the defence, green lights. The try is awarded, and he hasn't grounded that. I'm sitting there thinking, why are we looking at this? It's a no try. And it was the same story in the commentary box with Sky Sports. They were thinking the same thing. It's a no try. I don't know what angles they were looking at to definitively say that was a try. I just don't. And that played a pivotal moment because I would think that played a contributing factor to Warrington levelling the scores up. And then George Williams, in his first game, he's already contributed 1 try assist so far in his Warrington career. And then the drop goal with 30 seconds left to ice the game for the Warrington Wolves, 27 to 26. It was still a very entertaining clash. And I think that I didn't get a crowd capacity check on that, but I would probably think 9,000 at least. It's like in the Wigan game. 9,000 people in the South Stand. I know Bill Arthur didn't enjoy it, the Sky Sports commentator leading the call, but come on. Listening to that South Stand, I mean, it is absolutely magic. And of course, Harry Newman, he almost probably raised the South Stand. And again, after the performance he put in, coming in again, 2 try assists, 4 tackle breaks there. But honestly, I would probably have to say Jack Hughes, despite only playing 70 minutes because he got sin binned with about 10 minutes to go, 114 running meters, 2 tackle breaks, and 1 offload. So another good performance for Warrington. It's back to the drawing board for Leeds, and it just gives Hull FC a little bit of breathing space here. Someone who is really putting space between themselves and the bottom of the table now, the Huddersfield Giants, after demolishing the Castleford Tigers 34 points to 16, and oh boy, Castleford's left edge. Now, I know Castleford has had their side all over the place in recent weeks. They honestly have positive cases, injuries, long term. I mean, think of it this way: Sasaya Feki has not played a game at all this year for Castleford. He simply hasn't. I think Michael Shenton. There was no. Oh no, wait, no, he was there in the sub. I'd have to rely on other loanees and young youngsters. Jimmy Kindhorst getting involved in this game, and probably on loan and from Hull Kingston Rovers as it stood. But things just went wrong, and their defence was absolutely appalling, especially their left side defence, as Will Price, young scrum half for the Giants, having to step up with no Aiden Caesar, which is highly understandable, and he just absolutely dominated. Leroy Kodjo slicing his way through, Jermaine McGilvery getting another crack down that right-hand side, and then you allow 2 forwards in Luke Yates and Nathaniel Petteru to crash their way through. I don't know what Darryl Powell would say about that, but I would think the reaction from Ian Watson would be, well done, lads. We're really starting to find confidence in ourselves, and we're starting to feel comfortable with how we are playing at the moment. We can still make a run here. We can still get to Old Trafford if we really put it down to it. I mean, they're in 8th at the moment, but they can close in on Castleford points-wise. But again, win percentage, it can be a bit cruel sometimes. But they are closing in on both Hull KR and the Castleford Tigers. Leeds also understand this. If they can put some distance between the teams 7th to 10th, because no one knows what's going to happen with Salford at various stages. But if they can put the gap between them, I think they will be fine on this. And Mark Sports on this as well with this Huddersfield performance. He mentioned this could have gone either way ever since the loss in the cup for the Tigers. And also coined Jermaine McGilvery the new nickname, Show Me the Money. Hey, look, I made that Jerry Maguire reference as a joke at the beginning. I didn't think he'd actually be serious on that. But, well, he owns half the property. So I suppose I'll let him have a couple of things there. But the Tigers lack direction. I think that was to address on that front in defence and in attack. They just didn't have anything to throw at Huddersfield, and they paid the price for that poor display right there. And our final two games from round 17, we had Hull FC get absolutely belted by St Helens, 42 points to 10. And what are you going to say? Just outclassed again. And these were very early predictions. You have to keep that's in mind, that some of these predictions, especially when you got 2 rounds played back to back, we got to call it at the time. We don't have the luxury of it, especially in Australia, where we get to make our predictions and go off like that round by round. No, if they got to play 2 rounds back to back, say you go 2 days, Thursday to Friday, and they got to play again Sunday or Monday, we got to do it in 1 week. It's all going to be done in 1 week. So we make the effort. We try our best. We mightn't get it right, but at the same time, if we do get it right, then hallelujah. As for the Saints, well, they just go, keep on going. I mean, I don't know how many times Regan Grace has featured this year, but Jack Wellesby is really causing headaches for Christian Wolf. And what better way of having the coach's confidence and saying that you will be the starting fullback next year is coming onto the left wing and scoring a hat-trick. What other way is there of saying it? Just him down the left edge. He's got Mark Percival. He's got Joel Thompson with him on that left edge. Johnny Lomax in there as well, who of course is got to be the one to stand up with no Theo Farge on that up front. But I think they did rather well. And then of course you got the right edge, Kevin Nagama and Tommy Makinson. I mean, can you keep him out of a game with St Helens? Honestly, every time you get close to watching most Saints games, you're probably thinking, oh yeah, Tommy Makinson's probably going to score here. I mean, if they did try-scorer markets for the Betfred Super League, I would bet Tommy Makinson would be short-priced every time St Helens would play a game. I would probably think him, maybe Tom Johnston, Tom Lynham, Josh Charney. It really depends. And at which point in time you're looking at it. And Hull, they are in trouble. Having close game aim, close start, good first half against the Leeds Rhinos, but that's their 3rd straight now. And with other clubs breathing down their necks, they ought to be wondering how they're going to salvage this. And they got to do it fast. It's a cutthroat business when you're in the playoff positions and you're starting to struggle. And finally, once again, with the Catalan Dragons, and holding on to an 8-4 lead at half-time and running out 23 points to 16 victors over Hull Kingston Rovers. And Romain Franco getting an opportunity for Steve McNamara. It's just wonderful to see, who I'm assuming, young French players like him, like Arthur Morgue, and Mathieu Laguerre get their opportunities. And just really show the development of French Rugby League. If this is their future, you would probably be feeling in safe hands. But I think the one thing you really have to highlight here, I think it is the England captain, Sam Tompkins. One try assist, 78 running meters, and 2 tackle breaks. He is probably playing his best season with the Catalan Dragons since coming up over. It might be his last contract. Who knows? I don't know. But Catalan are really flexing their muscles at this point in time. And Mark's really liking the way James Maloney was thinking when he kicked the drop-up goal, because he reckons anything could happen and anything to help their points differential when it comes down to his experience of the game, and with that extra point could be the deciding factor come playoffs. He thinks Hull KR might have scored a couple more tries, but the form that Catalan are showing is just next level. And when you've got 12 in a row at the moment, it's very hard to argue with that. You look at Saints, they're the 2-time reigning champions, and then you've got the French, mostly French, and Catalan Dragons just plugging along on doing what St. Helens would do at their best. Are they at their best yet? Well, who knows? Still got a long way to go, especially with, of course, that news that the Rugby League World Cup has been postponed until 2022. So who knows? Maybe the season might get it's extended. We're not too sure on that. But what I am sure of is we'll probably get details on that in the coming days with it. So another strong win for the Catalan and Dragons, and Hull KR falling out of the top 6 after back-to-back results. So for Tony Smith, he needs to find out what works, what doesn't, and make it fast. Now, round 18. And we begin at Emerald Headingley Stadium with the Leeds Rhinos against the Castleford Tigers. Now, there are suspension concerns for Leeds going on, but Castleford... Actually, it comes to this point where the squads are probably fully announced by now, and having a look at them, they are not. But Castleford's form line is not looking healthy. Not looking healthy in the slightest. We're talking 4 losses in the last 6. The defense has basically gone out the window for various reasons. They have lost their defensive edge that they had to start the year. I don't know where Castleford got with this exactly. I can't be too sure. But Marco has already just summed this up in a couple of things. He has predicted a Leeds 13-plus victory. When you look at on paper and the better form on the field, the Rhinos have outperformed the Tigers. And he says, just look at the previous results. I sort of see that the same way. You've got to really look at the middle of the Leeds Rhinos. Brad Dwyer, when he comes on, or if he's starting, he is a pocket rocket you need to get a hold of, to try and shut him down in the middle of the field. Conrad Hurrell is another big target. If he's on a roll, he's going to be very hard to stop. You get him frustrated, you make him try and come out of the line, put a shot on. If you get him frustrated and run at him again and again and again, he will break on occasion. And you can exploit Conrad Hurrell to your full potential to get round him. Now that's going to be a job without Michael Shenton, and I believe unavailable for that game. And with all the mounting injury problems Castleford are facing, I have to agree. I think Leeds will run out 13-plus winners over Castleford, and it's just going to be another diabolical display from Daryl Powell. I think it's stalling, and it's going to stall fast. Now, the Wigan Warriors against the Salford Red Devils. Well, after that performance they put on against Lee, I have little faith in Salford at the moment. And as Mark has mentioned, it just shows no matter how big or small the turnarounds are, they can still manage to win. And Salford have been much better than Castleford. Well, Castleford have been better than Salford, but Salford aren't the same side they were in 2019. I think that is a point that has been reiterated time and time again, and I think Wigan are going to get players back. Jai Field, I know I might have said this a couple of times in the past and it hasn't come through, but once Wigan settle down and get a stable backline going, as well as keeping everyone in the park in the forward pack that aren't throwing punches and getting red carded, they can crush almost anyone on the table. Well, I say almost anyone. Top 3 opposition is going to be a whole lot different. But I agree, Wigan will down Salford 13+, and I think Jackson Hastings will have another outstanding performance for the Cherry and Whites. But never mind them. The match of the round could be even the game of the year. The Catalan Dragons, the reigning champions, the host I must have messed that up. St. Helens, reigning champions, to host the Catalan Dragons at the Totally Wicked Stadium in St. Helens. Well, this one is going to be interesting. 2-time reigning champions in one corner. In the other corner, a team that has not had a loss since round 4. That's right, round 4, when they lost to the Warrington Wolves. They have not dropped a game since. They've had a lot of comebacks, though. So it really depends how fast the start St. Helens get off to. Because it amazes me that Catalan could be 18-8 down against Leeds at half-time. Then James Maloney drags them out of the doldrums to come up over the top by a little way. And then your games against Hull KR, your games against Wakefield. Competitive first halves, and then you power over the top of them in the second. They got very lucky. But it's also the experience of players like James Maloney, Josh Drinkwater, and Sam Tompkins in that spine, and that forward power that they have of in the middle and on the edges with the wingers. This could be a very entertaining game. As for Mark, he says he's leaning slightly towards the wayside because they've been playing extremely well when down on Troop. And he would like to see the winning streak continue, so he has backed Catalan to down St. Helens in what he calls a 1-4 margin. Well, I have to agree with him on this. I think Catalan will win this 1-12. I think we'll throw everything at Catalan, even if they're leading comfortably. I think the Dragons could set this up as a grandstand game of the year. So I got to agree with him on that. And 3 games on the Monday. We have, first of all, the Huddersfield Giants hosting Wakefield Trinity. Given the way that Wakefield have played and just not been able to put anything consistent together, and given that the Giants are coping with a lot more challenges than Wakefield are, I don't see it. Mark sees it differently from me. He believes that Wakefield will win this game in a 1-12 margin because they'll be looking to bounce back from a defeat, but at the same time, he thinks they'll be determined to keep it clear from the bottom of the table even further. I don't think Wakefield have got many attacking options. I know they've had internationals Combined Nations All-Stars like Reece Lynn. Liam Kay's a very good winger, as he's demonstrated in the past, but no Tom Johnston, a consistently inconsistent backline, and a forward pack that is just not provided the starch arch and the platform needed to give Mason Lino time and space. And behind the right forward pack, in the right squad, Mason Lino has proven he is a match winner. That just hasn't happened for Wakefield. You look at Huddersfield, on the other hand, they've lost a whole host of top-line talent. Lee Gaskell, Aiden C. These are 2 of the biggest key players that are going to guide Huddersfield at this point. Not there. And they've had challenges of their own. They've struggled in a lot of occasions, and of course hold the embarrassing record of having the fastest try in the world conceded against them. So there is that too. But I think the Giants are in a much healthier position at the moment than Wakefield, so I'm going to back Huddersfield for a 1-12 victory here. And finally, in front of the Sky Sports cameras, Sunday evening, which is probably sometime early Monday morning, we'll have the Lee Centurions hosting Hull Kingston Rovers at the Lee Sports Village. There's really nothing more that can be said. I think Hull KR are a better side than what they have shown. They missed opportunities against Catalan to try and make it a close game as they have done in the past. But this is one-way traffic. Mark and I will both agree on this. They will win 13 plus, as they will easily be the better side and make Lee's season more unfortunate and more miserable than it has been, even with Sam Stone and Jai Whitbread joining the Centurions just in recent days, and Joe Mellor extending his contract with the Red and Whites as well. I'm sorry, it's just not going to work out well for the Lee Centurions, and I'm going to make an early prediction. I believe Ryan Hall will score a hat-trick in this game. Just to keep his place on top of the try scorers charts, I think he will bag a hat-trick as they tear Lee's defence limb from limb. Well, that is your Betfred Super League round 16, 17 and 18 debrief right there. But don't go anywhere. We'll have all the NRL action coming up after this. Are the Eels in trouble? Can Penrith hang on against the Roosters? And who can really say that the Dogs are going to even bag a win in this final month and a bit? Stay tuned, and I'll answer all your questions then.